Hello. Hello, everyone. Hello. Okay, I think this is everyone, right? Are we waiting for one more person? Oh, I see Heather. Okay, great. Excellent. Okay. And the interpreters? Okay. All right, let me begin. I'll introduce myself. My name is CM Boryslawskyj. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm on the board of the Northeast region, and I'm also the treasurer for TDI. As you can see, this is in my home. I'm not at any particular office. I want you all to be yourselves, be comfortable. I want this conversation to be real interactive and engaging. We are all here as advocates for access. Please feel free to introduce yourselves now. Anybody can start.
This is Sean Forbes. I've always been an advocate for accessibility for my whole entire life. I'd like to provide accessibility for music and different sorts of things. We have a captioning company that we use by the name of ASL Caption. Our primary focus is sign language captioning, but we also do a lot of audio captioning as well.
Okay, next.
My name is Josh Pila. I'm the general counsel for Meredith local media and video groups. As part of my job, I'm the NAB's representative on the Disability Advisory Committee. NAB is the National Association of Broadcasters. Meredith also owns a captioning company that falls under my purview called Dynamic Captioning. And I'm very looking forward to this discussion today.
I'm Heather York. I work at VITAC and I have been involved in captioning for over 25 years. We're the largest closed captioning provider for media and entertainment in the country, and I've done just about every job here. Right now, I'm in charge of marketing and government affairs. I am a huge fan of TDI and have worked with the group for about 15 years now. I worked on the 20th Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, the SEC group that helped finalize those rules. I've been on 3 disability advisory committees, and I've helped with caption quality, caption clips, and digital transition rules and requirements. Our company specializes in live captioning for media, like I said. Media is moving to streaming, so I asked to be on this streaming group because I really think that's where the future is, and I'm excited to talk about it. I'm also excited to be wearing my co-panelist t-shirt that says no more craptions, but you can't see it, unfortunately. I'll get a better shot later. Thanks, Rikki.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you. Yes, hi. So my name is Rikki Poynter. This is Zane. He's just gonna be here. But if any of the hearing people hear an actual screaming cat, that would be Simon. He may come in and out. I apologize in advance. He's gonna scream whether or not I close the door. So I am deaf. I will be speaking throughout the conference, this panel, because I did grow up mainstream deaf, and English is my first and main language, so I'm just more comfortable making sure that what I want to say gets through and is understood. So yeah, and for the last, I want to say, may as well say almost a decade, I've been a YouTuber. I moved from doing makeup to talking about being mainstream deaf, mainstream deaf, not deaf. I'm becoming iPhone autocorrect. Oh my God. I moved from I started talking about being mainstream deaf, and then finding a deaf identity, learning ASL, and also accessibility, primarily with captions on YouTube. And yeah, so I kind of started a campaign, and here we are.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for those powerful words. Okay. Now, for all of you, can you share about some of the gaps that you have seen in streaming? in announcements that have been made, in clips that you've seen on TV. Tell me your experiences. What have they been? Does anybody want to volunteer to begin?
I can start. This is Heather, because there are rules. There are FCC rules that require captions on television content. There are rules that require captions on streaming content that was first broadcast on TV, but there really aren't FCC rules that manage streaming content. And everything, like I said, is moving, or at least growing on the web, where you used to have one, Masters tournament that you'd see on one channel for 1 hour on a Saturday and Sunday. Now you've got a streaming channel for every single hole in every single golf competition. All that is growing. None of it is mandated by the FCC. There are some different requirements. I think there are a lot of agreements in place regarding the ADA, but we're seeing a lot of these streaming channels go out there and grow. Luckily, a lot of the big broadcasters are continuing to make them accessible and are dedicated to accessibility, but I think we're still losing out in quite a few places where we're not seeing captions being thought of first or foremost as much as they are in the TV world. If that makes sense.
I will go next. Hi, this is Rikki. I'm gonna say this in case there's any deafblind people here. But yeah, so I am a YouTuber. I'm also a streamer. I stream on Twitch. I play games and stuff like that. So we do have the ADA, and then recently, in more recent years, we had the, oh God, I forgot exactly what, the CVAA or something like that. It's the online equivalent of the ADA in terms of like deaf accessibility or something. But yeah, there's like, it's very different across the board. So especially with like professional YouTube channels, like say NBC has put their shows on YouTube, and then their captions it'll have this like professional aesthetic. And then you have like people like me who will either outsource captions from a company like Rev or iMedia or whatever, and then people who also write their own. Mine get outsourced mainly from iMedia, sometimes Rev. I have an acquaintance who we just recently started talking about this. He runs a horror channel, and his captions are very, very good, but sometimes he will outsource from Rev, and he would get one of his caption files had quotations around movie titles, and then he was like, that's not grammatically correct. But then Rev would be like, well, our, oh God, what's the word I'm looking for? Like our catalog, our guidebook or whatever says that we put captions on movie titles, but then we went onto the actual catalog and it said that they don't put captions or quotations on movie titles, but that's what they said in the email. So I feel like iMedia, Rev, or everybody else has their own like set guide on what they do, and it's so confusing when you're trying to figure it out. Oh, there's Simon. Sorry. So yeah, there's been that, and also with creators who will write their own captions. Sometimes they have this really, really long like first sentence, and then there's one tiny word on the second line, and there's a little bit of, that's the word I'm looking for, a gap, I guess you would say. I mean, the words are right. It's just sometimes the actual formatting of them gets confusing. And then obviously there's the automatic captions format where everything looks like this, and it's like a couple words here and then stop, and there's no grammar, things like that. So I feel like it's all over the place and things. Next person.
I would jump in and say that captions have come a long way since they've been first founded. That's first and foremost. I think that the technology is here. But one thing I will say as a newcomer into this area, I feel a lot of frustration as a deaf person. With a lot of these different caption companies, there's no consistency across the board. And, you can automatically see when you're watching any program, whether it's a person typing it or a robot, AI captions, for example. With my team and with what we do, because we are primarily a deaf captioning team, is that we always emphasize that our clients are the deaf community. what's going to make the deaf community enjoy watching this content. Because I will tell you, there are many things I've wanted to watch on Hulu and Netflix or Amazon. And when I start watching it, and if the captions are behind, ahead, not perfect, it ruins the whole experience for me. So, you know, it's like I feel like there's still a lot of things that need to be resolved. Like I said, the technology is there, and sometimes with the FCC and with limitations on things, limitations can sometimes be a problem.
Who would like to volunteer next? Joshua, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I want to add a little bit to the discussion. I'll start by saying, I should have said in the introduction, that not only am I the lawyer who has to work on these issues but on behalf of broadcasters and content companies, but I've worn hearing aids since I was 4 years old, and my two sons, who are 11 and 9, also wear hearing aids. So I've been a caption user since the 1990s, which puts me in an interesting spot because I'm both a user and I'm working for and with the companies that are producing a lot of their content. So it's kind of like those old hair clip for men commercials, if anybody remembers those. But one of the things I do want to point out, and I think Rikki said this a little bit, is when I'm online, I find that even though the CVAA and the FCC's rules don't apply to content that was not originally on television, meaning that's a jurisdictional issue, not to get too lawyerly, but the statute does not cover it. The major players, the Hulus, the Amazons, the Netflix, they actually require contractually that their content providers provide captioning. So, you know, one thing I've noticed, and going a little bit to what Sean was saying, is that when they first started requiring the captioning, it was just that there was captioning or subtitles there. And it was off timing, and it was, you know, the contractual phrase said you must have captioning, and that was sort of it, and they complied by putting something there. I will say that especially over the pandemic, I've seen better captioning on Netflix and Amazon and Hulu for content that was only online and therefore not required by law. But one of the interesting things that I've seen, and I think this is because of teleworking and multi-screen worlds, that I've seen more medium-sized players use subtitles because people are watching videos on their phone without audio. I'm forgetting about all of us who need that, but just sort of from the able-bodied, the general population, there's been a trend towards subtitles. Now, are those subtitles very good? Not always, but they're more than I saw a year ago. So, you know, Heather will know that you don't often hear me be optimistic. It's not generally my nature, but in the last year, I think that because so much of our life has moved online, and captions and subtitles are used not only by us on this call, but by my wife, who can hear perfectly fine, that I'm seeing a marginal improvement. And I do want to put that out there and thank those medium-sized creators, those YouTube personalities that are taking that extra effort to include that. Thanks.
Absolutely. Okay, now Rikki, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I love this feature. What is it? Okay, it's funny that you mentioned what Sean was mentioning and Joshua too. I was watching a movie on Hulu last night, and some of the captions weren't even on. They'd be like talking. I'm like, oh, okay, read, and it stops, and I'm like, what is it saying? Like it just stops right in the middle, and I'm like, what the heck? Yeah, that was a little bit annoying.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll take a moment. I know there's a lot of work that we need to do. There's still a lot to do ahead of us. Now, with ASR, the impact of ASR. Does everyone know what ASR means when I say, Sean is saying auditory speech recognition? So that has improved our situation, or do you feel like we haven't seen an improvement because of that?
Joshua, go ahead. Yep.
So on ASR, which is automatic speech recognition, and I know Heather can give some more information about the different types of ASR, because it's not just one monolithic ASR. I mean, it is using artificial intelligence, AI, to produce caption content, but there are many different types of ASR, whether that's human coordinated ASR or machine learning ASR. So I just, before we get into the ASR discussion, I do want to just not lump it all into one monolithic category, but to say that there are many different versions, many different companies, many different technologies, but generally it is the inclusion of artificial intelligence, and I wouldn't don't just presume that the YouTube ASR is all ASR, because that has a very specific purpose. But I don't know, Sean, I don't want to jump you, but I know Heather has talked a lot about these different kinds of ASR because we've been on panels together to talk about them.
Shall I go ahead, Sean? Do you mind? I was just gonna. Okay.
I can.
Did have my hand up before? Thank you. I want to mention that I think ASR, like Josh said, yeah, I agree. I have tested every company out there. I've tested it. You know, I like to. I have a, with my team, you have an experimental process where we test things out. And one thing I've noticed is that ASR can be great for videos that are in post-production that haven't been put out yet. As a way to speed up the process, but it definitely needs a human to review it and to make sure that, everything is accurate. Because, for example, ASR is not going to, if a John Fogerty song comes up, it's not going to recognize that it's a John Fogerty song and what the title is. That's something that a human has to implement in there. And the second thing is I think that ASR, in my opinion, for live captioning is awful. It doesn't matter who it is. It's just not great. And, as a deaf person, like when I see like automatic ASR live captioning, I turn it off.
Yeah. I understand, Sean, what you mean by that. Absolutely. Okay, was there anybody else that wanted to, we can move on to the next question, yes? How does everybody feel about that? Heather, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say really fast, going back to the different types of ASR that Josh mentioned. There is straight ASR, which is what you'll see on YouTube and a lot of local news stations nowadays. Then there we like to talk about assisted ASR, which is more like what Sean said, which is ASR that has the advantage of a human cleanup associated with it. But even within like those two different variables, there are a million different providers. We've seen, this is TV, not streaming, but we've seen a lot of local news stations that have trained their anchors to speak very slowly and very clearly, use ASR engines or boxes that have also been trained with proper names. And I'm still not a big fan of it, but it's a lot better than I thought it would be in some of these markets. And it is a significant savings for some of these TV stations. TV stations that just throw the box on the air and don't train it and don't tell their people to talk slower than I'm talking now, they're going to have a problem with ASR captions. But there are probably about 5 or 6 companies out there that are creating different ASR engines that are in use in small markets largely. We are seeing more of it in streaming, and I did want to point out right now that the Olympics is streaming 7,000 hours of content, and only 2,000 hours of that is captioned by humans. 5,000 hours of that is ASR. And if anything's hard to caption, it's sports with ASR. You have noisy swimming pools, you have noisy anchors, you have anchors with accents, you have people talking over each other. If you want a good example of it happening right now in the streaming world, I would advise to look at the Olympics, the highlight reels. You can tell it's ASR because there's no punctuation, there's no speaker change. It's lowercase, not all uppercase. So that's a good place you can see ASR on streaming right now, live to millions of people.
Hi, this is Rikki again. Yeah, so as a YouTuber, both as a creator and as a viewer, from a viewer standpoint, ASR has gotten better in terms of words. One of my most used examples from years ago when I would be talking about how awful automatic captioning was I was watching a makeup video that was supposed to be about concealers, you know, little liquid coloring underneath the eye. But when I would be reading the captions on the video, instead of concealers, it would say zebras, the animal. Two very different things, and I don't think anyone wants a zebra underneath their eyeball. That sounds painful. That's just me though. Years later, you know, the words, as long as you have, you know, good audio, you have a good mic, there's no, you know, background noise, stuff like that. Words have gotten better. Grammar is a completely different story. That still needs to be worked on. I know people at Google who say that they've been working on it, and you know, it takes some time. In terms of as a creator, well, like I said, I tend to outsource my captions anyways. But now I'm trying to do more video content on like Instagram stories, and now going back to TikTok. I did TikTok for a month as a business deal, and then I stopped because captioning anything was a pain in the butt. And so as someone who is primarily an oral deaf person, you know, it would be hard to you know, caption what I'm saying. This was 10 years ago when I had better hearing, could possibly be doable. But now, you know, my hearing has gone, you know, very, very south. So I can't really understand myself anymore, which becomes a problem. So I started testing out the TikTok auto captions that they have now, because I was like, hey, maybe now I could come back to TikTok. I mean, yeah, sometimes I sign in videos, but sometimes I don't want to because I don't know the vocabulary. So I use English. And now I can just, like Sean was saying, the process is so much easier now. You can just take the automatic captions and then fix it a little bit, you know, and I may not have been able to understand everything that I was saying, but now I can get a better idea, you know, if like most of the words are right, I could try to read my own lips and then, oh, here's one word that's off, and I know that because now I remember the context of what I was talking about. So you know, there's good things and there's bad things, but it does help a lot. Especially, I tell YouTubers all the time, if you can't outsource your own captions, use the ASR, the auto captions, whatever, and just go back and edit those. That's going to be so much faster than typing it all out from start to finish, especially since YouTube loves to refresh itself and then lose progress. Use the automatic captions already there. Okay, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so you know, I would say, like Heather is saying, that ASR is good for some uses and not good for others. And so what I really encourage is not looking at different categories of captioning in a monolithic way of good and bad. So, for example, ASR is really good for single speaker environments with high-tech audio. So if you have a single speaker environment where you have really expensive microphones and really expensive sets and all of that, you know, I've personally done tests where I've done a live captioner next to an ASR, which and they've been about the same, and sometimes the ASR is actually better because once, like Heather was saying, once you train it for specific words, it knows those words in a way that a live captioner may not. So, you know, that's the positive. There are negatives in high noise environments. There are negatives in like YouTube when you're uploading audio files that are not high quality audio files. You know, we all think that we can make amazing audio and video off of our phones, but it's just not the same as if you're using a high quality you know, HD camera with high quality audio. So, just as you're looking at it, it depends on what the cost that you can bear, because ASR is much less expensive. And so what's the cost you can bear as compared to the scenario that you're working with for the video. So, I think it has positive attributes. It's a lot better than it was 5 years ago, and I think it'll be a lot better in 5 years than it is today. But Meredith owns a live captioning company that employs live captioners. So we also think that there's always going to be a niche for live captioners. There's always going to be environments where live captioners are just going to be the best and the most important in loud sporting events and loud news events, that the live captioners are going to be the best option. But you do have to weigh the different scenarios.
So with YouTube, the captioning, it would leave swear words, and I've known that it's gotten better over time. So now moving on to the next question. Now, does all of the web provide captioning? And Sean saying, do you mind saying that again? The website on the internet, is it all captioned? I know that there are some websites that don't have any captioning, and then there are some websites that do provide captioning. And then to add captioning, if anybody knows anything about that. Any comments, any thoughts? And Joshua, Sean's saying, Joshua, go ahead.
I think Google's new extension for captions is really cool, because I like to revisit like old music videos that I enjoyed like growing up, and just different like groups and interviews that I just enjoy watching that kind of stuff. And the majority of it is not captioned. A lot of the music stuff is just not captioned. I mean, I'm talking about like old videos from the 60s, 70s, 80s, like other groups that I grew up being exposed by my parents from. So yeah, this Google Chrome thing is awesome, but sometimes I have to turn it off because it'll start doing like double captioning. So I'm sure like in due time, Google will keep improving that feature, and to be able to turn it off and on as easy as like turning the captions on and off on Zoom.
Yes, and Joshua?
So this is Josh. I'm sorry. So this is Josh, and I'll follow up with Sean. I agree with Sean completely that it just depends. As we talked about it earlier in this call, the CVAA, which is the statute that applies to online content, requires captioning for content that previously appeared on television, because that's the FCC's jurisdictional hook. So, for a lot of that content, the CVAA is requiring captioning, and I think that all indications are those companies are doing a good job of ensuring it. But at one point, I heard a stat that every minute 1 million videos are uploaded to the internet, and I don't know if that stat is correct or if someone's just pulling it out. But whatever it is, a lot of videos are uploaded to the internet every minute. We don't live in a world where there's 4 broadcast networks and that's it anymore. Any one of us can be a content creator, and often are content creators. Even if it's a video of my kid's school or whatever it might be, that's video on the internet, right? And so, one of the things that is interesting when you are surfing is trying to find out sort of what providers are taking that step to add either subtitles or captioning. So, for example, I like stand-up comedy, and I found one online stand-up comedy site in Facebook Watch, and they provide subtitles, and so I can watch that and get the stand-up comedy from that. But other stand-up comedy comes up in my Facebook feed and doesn't have subtitles. So I watch the first 4 seconds and I can't understand it, and I move on to my Facebook feed, right? So it is, I think, finding the sources at the moment, but I do think there's a good number of sources out there that are findable, and you know, that kind of goes to what we were talking about with ASR versus human captioners. I'm not even sure we have enough human captioners who could caption all that content, and just from a requirements of they're very sophisticated people with really good education and are really type faster than you can ever imagine. That from a resource perspective, you know, what is that balance of what type of video online is getting captions, even though it's not an FCC rule, and then you know, finding the providers who are doing a good job at that and giving them your business. And you know, that's a lot of what I've been doing and my family's been doing, is giving the providers that do a good job with it the views, the eyeballs.
That is the part that is missing. Okay, moving on to the next question. I want to congratulate Sean for being awarded the DPAN channel. I really do enjoy watching that network. Now, how would you explain a little bit about that success with the president debate, and what did that involve? What did that procedure look like?
Back in 2016, I was running a news program called DTD News. In fact, I was a huge competitor, and Rikki actually used to write with us. I remember way back in the day. And, you know, during that time, really felt that, you know, since 2006, I had been focused on making music accessible. And through that journey, I started realizing that a lot of things are still not accessible for the deaf and hard of hearing community. So we started producing news, putting out content, you know, just really providing the deaf community with more information in their language, sign language. So in 2016, I remember I had started talking about the presidential debate, and I went out of town for a performance or something, and I flew back in, and the debates were like literally like the next day or 2 days later. My team was like, we have to do this, we have to. So that was the first one, and that was 3 debates between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And that was an incredible experience, because each live stream viewing of that, we probably got about 500,000 people watching it, which to me shows that the deaf community needs access to this information. The deaf community wants to be involved with politics. The deaf community wants to have a voice, and you know, it's like anybody else. But up until this point in time, we had never had the ability to watch and view. We often depend on the news. We depend on family and friends to tell us political views. And for me, it's always been important that the deaf community has their own voice, their own views, their own opinions, rather than being influenced or injected by your parents. Because I admit, like when I was 18, I voted for the first time, and I was like, okay, who do I vote for? Of course, the first people I go to are my parents. So mom and dad, like, who should I vote for? Like, I was just incapable of doing all the research. I wouldn't say I was incapable. I was lazy, okay? I was lazy. But the fact of the matter is that it made me realize that the deaf community really needs to get in their own language. So the second time in 2020, it was like, okay, we have to do this again. But what was interesting this time as opposed to last time, the first time we did it, we relied on the captions from whoever the provider was. I mean, I know that the presidential debates are produced by like the presidential debate committee and often aired on all of the TV platforms. So like we took the approach of using, I think, C-SPAN, and their captions were not that great. So this time around, I actually hired my own captioner, and I told them, I said, this is for the deaf community. Don't mess it up. Everything must be perfect. Everybody's going to be watching it. And, you know, it's really, I hope that this spawns a new generation of deaf politicians, a new generation of deaf people who are involved with government, and just really open the doors for the deaf community to be involved in this process. So thank you for, you know, giving us this award, and I want to thank my team for really, you know, making this happen.
Absolutely. Congratulations to your team for doing such a great job. So Joshua, I have a question for you. Now, when you think about our industry, and we think about promotion, raising awareness, accountability, about there not being enough captions out there, what can we do to enhance that, the quality of that, and to get people on board?
So I think a lot of it, it's a very good question. I think that one of the interesting things is there's always been a focus in discussions like this of, well, the FCC requires, or the law requires. And I do think that what was successful with the Amazons and the Netflixes and the Hulus of the world eventually was showing and I think Sean mentioned this, the competitive benefits of including accessibility, especially as the population ages, and you know, more people are using accessible features, whether that be captioning or screen readers or even just enlargements or things like that. You know, one of the things that I know that from our captioning company, that our sales, so to speak, the people that have come in as new clients recently, the new clients, some of them were, you know, 504 required because they were state or local governments, and so they had a DOJ requirement for accessibility, but a good number of them were just because they realized that a large portion of their audience was turned off, and that they were missing out on a competitive benefit. And so, you know, one of the things that I really encourage is the explanation of the benefits. I go back to when I was in college. I went to the University of Florida, the Foundation for the Gator Nation, and hope everybody, there's no like FSU fans or anything in here. But so when I went to the University of Florida, we had a pep rally. And as part of the pep rally, I asked them to include captioning on the big video screen. And, you know, we were able to do it. It may have even been VITAC. I don't remember who did it, but, you know, we had captioning. And my sisters went to the University of Florida 4 years after me. And even though nobody requested it, they kept doing it because they found that their older alumni loved it. They thought it was great because it was so loud and it was so difficult, and they could just, you know, quickly look at the screen. So, you know, one of the things that I find when I'm working with content providers is they want their content to be viewed and understood. And there's a balance between cost and benefit. And there's, you know, when you're talking about things like the difference in cost between ASR and live captioning, that's going to come into play. But I do think that if you can approach people with the concept of this is an audience that you can better serve, that seems to resonate far more than, well, you're required to do it. Because the you're required to do it is actually a 10-page legal memo about what's actually required under the CBAA and what's actually required under the FCC's rules, and it gets really complicated. It keeps lawyers like me employed, so that's good. But other than that, I think that really just selling the audience is really the way to go. And I know Heather deals with a lot of content people too, so maybe she wants to add to that or expand on.
So this question is for Rikki. Now, what made you decide that term craptions? What inspired you to come up with that terminology?
Hi, Rikki. Okay, so I did not actually come up with the term craptions. That's been around for forever, since before I even thought of it. So it was kind of just, oh, I heard about this, and let's group it together with this and that, and then everybody was just calling it craptions. So the only downside is sometimes people will still read it as just captions. So when you say no more craptions, people don't see the R, and then they go, no more captions. Doesn't that go against everything you just said? And I'm like, ma'am, sir, person, I'm gonna need you to look real closely because that's not what I said.
There's not.
Goodness gracious. Yeah. So, but yeah, yeah, it's just been a term that's been around, honestly, and it just comes off the mouth or off the hands real well. Just as long as somebody's reading it properly, everything's good.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that explanation. Wonderful. Okay. I'll let other folks who might have some questions or want to comment or anything. I see lots of comments in the chat. There could be some questions in there, but I haven't been keeping track. Let me see if I see a raised hand or, okay. Let me look in the Q&A. All right. So I see a question here. Okay, I'll choose one of these questions here. So captions in gaming, video games in particular. What can y'all say to that? Does anybody have anything to say about that?
Oh, I can. Yeah, because I've been streaming. Can I help you? Sorry, Simon. Yeah. So I mean, I grew up gaming. I used to play a lot of Pokemon back in the day, and that was probably the easiest game to play because everything is already laid out in front of you. I'm trying to remember back when I was a kid because I always had. Well, we don't really know if I had hearing loss as a kid. We didn't realize it until I was 11. So anything before then is a little bit. I don't know what the perspective is on that. I guess so, but when I started playing again, beyond Pokemon and Sims, because you don't really need captions for that because you could just read it or look at it. But there was some games where either there's no captions at all, so choose your adventure, interactive film type of games that I really like. Some games don't come with captions at all, so now it's a waste of money. Some games will have the weirdest looking captions ever, or subtitles as they like to put on, or subtitles as they like to call it, rather. I was one of the series I'm thinking of is The Walking Dead, and what I did like, at least for me, is that they would have different colored fonts for each character. So as long as you remember the color anyways and put it with the character, it's easy to know who was saying what if you really cared about that. Ken says GTA. I don't play GTA, so I don't know anything about that. But the one thing I have an issue with in games is that sometimes the captions, I wish I could make an example with my hands, but the font is so skinny. Each letter is so skinny that you can't even see it. And then it'll be white font, and then they'll put a black border around it, which is great, except for the fact that the font is so skinny. So everything just looks, so you got word, but everything looks like it's all smushed. Everything's shaking. Everything just looks like it's smushed together and you can't really read it. Well, sometimes it'll be so teeny tiny and they don't give you the option to make it bigger. And then also, sometimes they'll just have plain white text, tiny to boot. And then there's no background. There's no border around the actual text, but there's also no background underneath it to give any sort of contrast. And there was a recent game that really stirred things up on Twitter. I can't remember what it was, but the game itself would be it would be winter outside or something. So white subtitles or captions on snow. and you're meant to say, yeah. Sorry, somebody's trying to follow along. Yeah, so white text on like snow or something, and it's like, am I supposed to be able to read this? And even then, sometimes some games will have like, if it's a tutorial or something, they'll have the captions, but then the story, like the cutscenes or whatever, don't have captions. You want to know the story when you're playing a game. That helps you when you want to play in the game. Yeah, it's just, it's been so annoying. Of course, every time it comes up on Twitter, on deaf Twitter or disability Twitter, and then there's the what's the word I'm looking for? Just the people who think they're really up on the hierarchy or whatever when it comes to gaming. They're like, stop worrying about the games. You know, you mean those games aren't for you, man. Man. It's like, can you all not, please? Yeah. Rikki, please tell Simon. Alicia loves you.
Okay, so next, let's see the next question that we might have. I think it might have been answered already. Let me think. It says, it's a long one. Do you think it's wise to use ASR? Let's see. Do you all think that would also be wise to apply the same rules for ASR? I'm trying to see the question. A lot of the times we have witnessed at the end of some broadcast on television state whom provided the captions, right? Closed captions provided by the Department of Education. Do you all think that that would be helpful and apply that to ASR as well? What do you all think? And Sean, go ahead.
Might answer that question, but as someone who is very involved with the interpreting community, the captioning community, I've noticed that a lot of these FCC restrictions and other restrictions are in a lot of ways restricting the advancement of technology and the ability to work with things. Because like right now, like Netflix, Hulu, and everybody, like Josh said, like they're really on top of the accessibility feature because they know that the customers want that with absolutely no like oversight on it. So in some ways, it's like, I think that we need to be our own best advocates and we need to call out those that are not providing it rather than putting restrictions on it at the federal level right now. I think maybe down the road in a couple of years when the technology gets to a certain point, maybe we should implement restrictions. But I think right now technology is like rapidly going and I wouldn't want to put any restrictions on that.
Okay, and so let's see. There is one more question I see here. It says, with the lack of uniform standards across the board for web captions, despite WCAG guidelines, in your opinion, do you think there should be more regulatory oversight on web captioning? Is there anybody that'd like to answer that question, or Heather?
I think Sean just answered that question pretty well. There is a lot that's going on, and the thing is, I mean, it would be nice if there was a standard, but it's not necessarily possible to apply a standard. For example, Amazon Prime can only put captions in the middle of the screen on the bottom. Netflix wants captions to be placed next to the person who's speaking. The different players have different technological requirements so that you can't really apply the same rules or regulations. Maybe if you added a regulation saying you had to accommodate all of this, it would work, but I feel like the world is just too vast to even try to reach that point. I mean, to Sean's point, they're doing a lot already and they're on top of this sort of information. It's a great idea, but it seems like too big of a hurdle to me.
This is Josh. I want to add to Heather that there's, I agree with everything that Sean said and everything that Heather said, and just want to add that there are a lot of different kinds of content creators on the internet, and so we could talk about Amazon, Netflix, and Hulu, but even like talking about gaming companies or talking about even your local school board meetings or whatever it might be, that you're talking about a lot of different levels of sophistication and access to resources. And so that gets it really hard to have a standardization across the board. And it really goes to what I'm saying, that if there's something you like and they don't think they're serving you, that's the opportunity to reach out and say, I don't think you're serving us. And there's an opportunity for you to serve us. And that's, I look at it from that perspective of when the FCC captioning rules came about, there were, call it 10 places where you could get video content. The big four networks and ESPN and CNN and a couple other cable networks. I may be aging myself a little bit by that, but now my kids switch from one platform to another platform, from one creator to another creator. That the concept of a program guide is foreign to them because they just go wherever they want to go and to get that content, and that makes standardization really hard. But it does also mean that you can vote with your eyeballs and vote with your feet to promote that better content for everyone.
Yeah. Okay, I think that was it. We're gonna have to close down now or wrap up. Any last words, anyone?
I just want to say it's a pleasure to be in this panel with all of you and to talk about this. And captioning is always an exciting topic. And, for my organization, really the only reason that I got into captioning was because I noticed a lot of deaf people complaining about captioning. And I thought to myself, like, instead of complaining about it, do something about it, get involved. So, we have an amazing team of deaf captioners that, it's new. What we do is completely different from audio captioning because we're having to translate in the back of our heads and figure out what the deaf person is signing and how to put it into proper English and all of that. So, this whole journey is just fascinating, and I look forward to more discussions with all of you.
Okay. I think one last thing.
Yeah, hi, Rick here. Yeah, I just want to say real quick, following along with Sean, I'm very happy to be here. Like, if I can complain about captioning, well, at the same time doing something about it, I'm always here for you, talk about my perspective and things like that. And plus, I get to meet new people that have been awesome, and I get to work with Sean again for an hour. So, I appreciate being here. I really do.
Okay, wonderful.